Dan Dowdy. I live in the town of Seymour, just outside of Eau Claire. Originally I was from Ladysmith. I was a technical reconnaissance pilot in Vietnam. 1965 and 1966, I was shot down in April of 1966, and spent the next almost 7 years as a prisoner in North Vietnam. Repatriated after the peace agreements were signed in Paris in 1973, and come home. Got back to the U.S. in mid-February of '73. On the 2nd of April 1966, I was flying the mission into North Vietnam, flying out of Saigon, flight of 2, and we were photographing different targets, 13 different targets in the lower part of North Vietnam. I photographed the first 12, and the weather was bad, so we had to fly at very low altitude, stay below the clouds. Approaching the last targets, I was hit by an anti-aircraft projectile, and my aircraft exploded, and I ejected out of it. Fortunately, when the aircraft blew up, it went straight up, and so I gained quite a bit of altitude. So once the parachute opened, I had quite a bit of time to survey the situation. And on the way down, though, there were quite a few troops on the ground, started firing at me. And so I just hit the ground running, and didn't run very far, and I fell down behind a big rock, and it was fortunate because they were shooting considerably, and that kind of protected me. Within a few seconds they had got up there and captured me. And I was kept in that area, then taken around to an anti-aircraft site that I'm sure got credit for shooting me down, and taken around to a couple of different villages that night and put on display. Spent a few days in that area in a cave about 3 or 4 miles out of the village before they started transporting me towards Hanoi. It took a month before I arrived in Hanoi, and went into the main prison system there. I was expecting something like World War II, where they had a big compound with all the prisoners out milling around during the day and stuff, but we were all kept in isolation. At the time I got there, I was the 72nd American captured in North Vietnam, and there were some of them in 2-man cells, but an awful lot of us were in single cells, kept in isolation. I spent 13 months in solitary confinement. The treatment varied considerably from downright brutal torture to sometimes not quite so bad. It was about the way to describe it. The worst part was initially when interrogating for military information, brutal torture for days on end. We had been at a camp up on the China border, and were moved back into Hanoi, and we knew that the war was over, even though we hadn't been told that yet. And shortly after we got back into Hanoi, the camp commander had us fall out into a military formation. That's the first time we'd ever been out together in one group in this camp. There were at that time about 350 of us, I believe. And that's when the agreements on the release of prisoners was read to us. And I think the camp officials were expecting a big cheer when he read it, and everybody just had a very somber look, and turned around and went back to our cells. It was 2 weeks then before the first of us actually left Hanoi, and it was a very solemn affair. Nobody was cheering or hollering until we got on the airplane and it broke ground. And once the airplane was off the ground, there was a big cheer went up, and then another when we crossed the coastline heading out over the South China Sea, that everybody again a big cheer, because we knew we were out of there. And flew into the Philippines, where the Clark Air Base in the Philippines, a big military presence there, and I think everybody there turned out for our arrival. It was a tremendous welcome that we got